The reality is we have a growing need from patients needing more advice and expertise, and we have a diminishing pool. There's less and there's not enough physicians that are being generated. There's not enough nurses that are going through. In this particular round, AI and generative AI, it's just going to continue to go faster and faster and faster. And I think we're going to have a hard time keeping up, frankly, like not just on the front lines of clinical care, but on the whole aspect of how do we train different clinician types in this new reality. What I came to realize is, like, if I didn't try and start, stepping into these startup roles and gaining a new type of experience, I was probably going to be in my 50s or 60s at some point, and I would look back and go, well, why didn't I try that when I was in my 40s? The way our health system looks right now, with big, huge hospitals that are filled with people, I think hospitals will dwindle down, and there won't be as big of a need for actual hospital facilities, because we will be preventing all these things that happen that require hospitalizations.
Do you see the Tesla robot playing a role in the patient's health in the future at all?
I don't think it's a far stretch to think that, this future Tesla robot they would already know what you like to eat and what you have made in the past. They'll have that whole catalog. So, why can't that just generate a meal list and a grocery list and then order the groceries, and then the groceries are delivered to your house? You could remove all of those types of cognitive things that, tasks that you have to do.
My guest today is a physician and healthcare informatics expert with a focus on leveraging technology to improve healthcare delivery. He co-founded NerdMDs, an organization that promotes the idea of letting doctors be doctors by reducing the administrative burdens placed on physicians. He's also the chief medical officer at Heidi Health, where he is involved in integrating AI and other technologies into healthcare systems to improve efficiencies and reduce burnout among healthcare professionals. Without further ado, Dr. Adam Carewe, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, Nima. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, looking forward to the conversation.
Of course. So, you're the tech expert, on I love following you on LinkedIn, and I saw you review the new Google, I believe Notebook LM it is. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
That was wow. That I had the same reaction to it as you did with you. You're like, if you're not wowed by this, then I don't know what it is. You've been a trailblazer in merging healthcare with AI technology. Before we dive into any of the technicalities and anything like that, I'm curious, what was that aha moment for you that made you realize AI could revolutionize healthcare?
Yeah, I think, going back, I guess it's important to notice, AI has been around in healthcare for a while. It's just, it's been lurking in the backgrounds, around, different predictive models and those types of things, which, I think, patients and most clinicians weren't aware of. But I think, obviously I think the big aha was when ChatGPT 3 came out, really publicly, right? That was, I think, the big aha that people had and it was really, the magical interface that it was. People were comfortable typing text into a chat interface. And so I think as people started playing around with it, and including myself, you quickly realized the amazing potential to it. But I think it's, in that same token of how crazy amazing it was, and immediately I think your mind as a physician who was really into technology immediately went, okay, what are the implications of this? How is this going to help? How can this, transform, patient care for both the patients and the folks taking care of those people? And, I think on the same note, you got really excited, and then you realized, there's maybe a little bit of this that's not quite ready for that super prime time. But, I still think that the promise of this technology and everything around it is so exciting. And I think for the most part, what I tend to think of is, even with some of the limitations that there are right now with it, and some of obviously there's some recent stuff in the news, even this weekend around Whisper. But, I think the reality is it's only going to get better from here, and so even the shortfalls or shortcomings that has in the technology now is, the same technology in 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years from now is just going to be better and better. So we're going to start whittling down those side problems, and really, I think the amazing parts of this technology will really be able to flower and flounder and really help care delivery and patient care.
So I feel like, in healthcare, I went to pharmacy school, you went to medical school, all healthcare related. When we go to school, we don't really learn about innovation and entrepreneurship and, stepping out of the box. We're so focused on the books. And I feel like even in spent time in a hospital setting right now, some physicians have a hard time understanding Epic the way it is now. The way it is, the way it is now, and they feel like they're overwhelmed because there's so much information you can get from Epic. Do you think AI is just and technology and innovation is kind of like too much too fast happening all at once? Because like a lot of people still need that education and that, the learning of the basics, which they're having issues with already. I'm not sure if you have that experience on your end. Speak on that. Do you see that happening on your end, or do you see like physicians kind of picking up and not having any issues with the current state of our innovation? And we have all these great innovations that are coming up, which, you know, for the tech people and for the people that are interested, they're like, wow, I want to use it. But for the people that are not so techy, it might be a little hard for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think, in general, there's an acceptance and kind of a change adoption curve, for all clinicians. And yeah, I mean, I say in general in medicine, I think, I don't think that curve is probably fundamentally different than the general population. But, I think the only thing in all the clinical kind of training is, everyone's still trained around this concept of evidence based, like um, I think medicine in general has a hard time quickly pivoting to something new because, you know, the evidence to support it isn't quite there yet, right? And so, I think that's why there's been a big focus around newer technologies that kind of emerge really fast where, there's more of a cautionary flag that I think is waved at times. And it's appropriate because you don't want to just start jumping into using something. Just like if there was a novel medicine that showed a little bit of promise, for a particular disease, you wouldn't want to just wholesale jump in and start prescribing that. You know, you could argue maybe with these GLP-1s, maybe we have a
Oh,
little bit with the
oh
weight
yeah.
loss, but
No, don't
I
get me
think
started. Don't get me started on
yeah, no,
that.
we don't. Yeah, we don't have to go down that rabbit hole. But I mean, I think in general there is a general skepticism to new things in medicine, which in general is good because you want medicine to stay sound. But it is, it's tough when there's something that comes along, that has like so much potential to really transform healthcare, and you know, and there's a fair amount of, I don't know, call them naysayers or kind of negative spin that's around it, which does get tough to navigate. But I think to your like specific question, you know, this is going to be tough. I mean, I think technology is only in this particular round, AI and generative AI, it's just going to continue to go faster and faster and faster. And I think we're going to have a hard time keeping up, frankly, like not just on the front lines of clinical care, but, on the whole aspect of how do we train different clinician types in this new reality. Um, I mean, I think back, well, actually, my wife just got back from, she went back to her college reunion. It was her 20-year reunion. And, they walked through the library with our 13-year-old daughter. And, there's like books everywhere and a lot of, it was at Emory University, which, has a fair bit of history. But, she was asking someone in the library, she's like, you know, there's not really like, there wasn't really any textbooks in there. And she even asked, she's like, do you guys use textbooks anymore in college? And the person was like, well, yeah, we do, but they're all online. Like we don't actually use the book. And so, some things have changed, but just I think so much in medical and other clinical specialty education has to adapt to kind of this new reality of being able to get information really quickly. And the old ways of of teaching have to slowly start to adapt. So I don't know, long-winded way of answering that question, but I think it's an interesting time because technology advancing is going to go faster and faster, but everything that leads up to it has to change too, and there's going to be some resistance and challenges.
For sure. I mean, I even at the hospital, like I always come across at least one person that still doesn't know what ChatGPT is, and I'm like, if you don't know what ChatGPT or even Open, even forget about let's say ChatGPT, and you say Open AI, they're like, what even is that? So they when they don't even know those things, it's like I love all the innovations, but we need to realize how to like manage it all so we can gain something out of it. Um, do you think we can get reputable, I guess, get these technologies implemented and people to believe in them more if we get healthcare professionals in the boards or being the founders of these companies? Because I made a post about LinkedIn a couple weeks ago saying, whenever I see a pharmacy related company and I go look at the CEO or the founder and I see it's just someone that has like a, business degree or whatever it is, and it's not a healthcare professional, not a pharmacist, it like breaks my heart. I'm like, why are we the people that are the foundation of really understanding this technology, not maybe not technology, but the backbone, the bones of the technology? Why are those people not really finding and coming through and creating these things? Someone like yourself, you're doing great things, but we need more of you in the business to be able to make these technologies reputable. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I always say like, any of these technology companies or medicine in general is a team sport, but yeah, I mean, you have to. I tend to have the same belief you do, especially with it's probably a bias being a physician, but when I see a healthcare company that has a physician founder or physician co-founder, um, I mean, I think that does give more credence to the company. Because to your point, I mean, those are the folks that are going to know the best of the pain points, And again, I think there's extremely smart people that can help to found companies and kind of work together. But I do worry when there's a company that has, that they're trying to revolutionize pharmacy or medicine or nursing or whatever, and they don't have one of those core nurses, pharmacists, physicians on their kind of founding team. So yeah, I think it's important. Just like I wouldn't want I'm trying to think of like a quick analogy, but like, you wouldn't want someone coming up with some sort of novel plane technology who's never like been a pilot or, been a part of
Yeah,
like
yeah.
airplane manufacturing, right? So, but I mean, that's not to say there's not brilliant engineers out there that could come up with something that could be incorporated into that. But yeah, I think you have to surround yourself with the core kind of content experts around whatever you're trying to build to have the most success.
Yeah, just a side comment in regards to pharmacy. Since I'm a pharmacist, I always thought if the CEO of CVS was a pharmacist, would it have better outcomes? Because the CEO has never been a pharmacist, and it's like I wonder if it was a pharmacist, they would have better outcomes or not. But that was just a side comment about pharmacy. If you have anything to say about that, we'd be more than happy to.
No, no, I agree. I mean, the medical group that I was a part of at Kaiser Permanente for 13 years up until August of this year, you know, that medical group is physician led. So the president of that medical group is a physician. And all the leaders, with the exception of like a financial and a legal leader in that group, are essentially physician leaders. So I do think um it really does make a difference. And yeah, it's I think the CVS thing are really into these companies that if you think of what their core product is, um, if those folks could come from that core background, I do think it could lead to better outcomes or better, capabilities and leadership through that.
Yeah, I got to give a shout out to Cleveland Clinic for that because I think one of their things that they stand for is that their CEO has to be a physician in order for them to be a CEO at Cleveland Clinic. So, got to give them a shout out for that. The health conference HLTH. You just came back from that. I just went on your LinkedIn right before we started this, and I saw your post about having to recover maybe a week or two from it. Give us a little recap. How was that? What was your experience? What did you discover? What did you see? Um, Give us a little recap about your experience with that.
Yeah. I mean, so number one, like, this was my first time ever going to that conference, either as just a casual observer or as a part of an organization. Um, but, I've known enough people that have gone to it that I kind of like I did know a little bit what to expect. I think any of these like mega huge health conferences in the US or abroad, I mean, sometimes they can become very overwhelming really fast, especially if you're not going there with a very specific reason. You know, this time was fun, particularly for me because it was the first time I got to meet a lot of my Heidi Health colleagues. There was several of the team members, and including the couple of the co-founders that came over from Australia, as well as some of the folks from the UK team, and then some from obviously the US team. So, I'd say number one goal of this event for me personally was like to get to know the people that I'm working with, which was great to obviously see them in person and be able to talk and hang out. But I think, overall, yeah, I mean, health, obviously a great conference. I think the way that conference is organized, number one, is really quite brilliant. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, there's a ton of kind of glitz and flashy lights and kind of glamour to it, which I think everyone that's been can acknowledge. But you know, they put together really good speakers, really strong panels, and then, there's a very strong vendor presence there too, which I think is important in this space, because I think, again, living on the healthcare side, the being a part of the care delivery system side for so long, you know, the only way you know that there's good stuff out there is by going to these types of conferences, because that's where you can literally roam the floors and find things um, to see what people are working on. And, the health conference, they do a good job of kind of navigating people through that. Like there's only one entrance, and even where to get food, you have to walk through kind of this vendor area. And so I just think they do a great job at organizing it and around it. And then, overall for me, I mean, yeah, I mean, hearing some of the talks on the first day, the rest of the time for me, I was spent really around the Heidi booth and connecting with people that, I had the opportunity to meet in person. So just being able to have those conversations with folks, shake their hand, give someone a hug. I mean, it's great to connect in that way because so much of our life lives kind of digitally and kind of remote now. So overall, great conference, but yes, like I said in that post this morning, definitely exhausting. Early mornings, late nights, and not quite as much sleep as I normally get.
You mentioned Heidi Health. Let's talk about that. How did that come about with you going on board, becoming a CMO there? And then explain a little bit about what Heidi Health is for the people that are listening that don't know.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, so let me tell a little bit about what Heidi Health is first. I mean, so Heidi Health right now is an AI scribe product. It was born out of Australia, um, and was started in 2021. And really, it's kind of it's one of the few AI scribes. There's not many that are, I would say, are really kind of worldwide. And so that's what's kind of always enticed me about that company, because I think if you can create a product that can actually be used worldwide by all the different places that medicine is practiced and clinical practice is taking place, I mean that's pretty impressive from just that standpoint because of all the regulations and the compliance that goes into to different countries. Um, but I think the I found out about Heidi because of the podcast that I host, the NerdMDs Efficiency Unlocked podcast. And, that podcast kicked off by interviewing a lot of these founders for the different AI scribe companies. Because again, this was new last year. If you think like November, December of just 1 year ago, is really when these kind of really started kind of coming about and taking off. And so I had met Tom, one of the co-founders, who is a physician. Back to your original question, do physician founders uh, make a difference? I think they do. And so, I knew Tom and interviewed him on my show, and we just kept in contact. And I think what happened when I decided to make this kind of career pivot to get into the startup world and really kind of jump in feet first to to really experience it and learn from others, um, I put out on LinkedIn that I was available for this kind of fractional kind of role or advisory or fractional CMO, CMIO, whatever you want to. I said I'm willing to help in any way, and and again, Tom reached out to me and he asked, he said, it looks like you're looking for kind of maybe a bunch of smaller roles, but what would it take for you to join us? They were, that Heidi has a presence in the US, but they didn't have any specific US based physicians or clinicians kind of as a part of the team. And um, so that's really where I was honestly a good amount of timing. Like, right when I was leaving, they were looking to create this spot. And at the same time, Heidi had just recently hired a physician CMO for the UK market as well. Because again, they started in Australia. The UK market is, there's always differences in the way medicine is practiced. So, myself and the UK CMO were hired, and so I think it's a way for us to bring a perspective of experience of practicing medicine in the country that the company is trying to operate in, for better relations and just to help kind of steer the product to best fit with the markets that it's trying to grow in. So that's a little bit about the reason, and a bit
Awesome.
about Heidi.
So you've experienced the whole transition from paper to EHR, the electronic health record. I'm not trying to age you, but you've been able to experience that from Denver when you were doing your residency. Seen that transition. And ever since I've been, in the path of healthcare and in pharmacy, and even before that in undergrad, I remember the talks of like the universal EHR, how helpful that will be for patients and they taking care of patients. And, we do have the health information exchange in place that kind of helps with that universal EHR concept. Where are we with that universal HR concept in your opinion? And why hasn't it been a thing already? I feel like it would be such a easy, well, it's easier said than done, right? But from the outside looking in, you would think it would be such an easy thing to implement, especially with Epic and how powerful and huge they are. Um, what, where's the hole? Why is this not have happened yet?
Yeah, I think, so I know to the outside it seems like it seems kind of weird, right? That something was invented, these EHRs were developed, and the concept of being able to transfer the data to and from, um, you'd think would have been made in the very beginning of all this and made it easy. I think what happened was, well, actually, I don't think this is what happened. The systems when they first were developed, there wasn't certain standards that were around for actual interoperability. I think it seems obvious to think like, oh, a medicine is a medicine is a medicine. Why can't that just be kind of equally exchanged and made available? Well, the challenge is where all these different systems, as they were developed, they recorded those medicines in different ways. So there wasn't like a perfect way to match this content. And and I think, if we could rewind time and go back, yes, before all these systems were developed, we should have come up with a whole host of base kind of standards, because then all the systems could have been built around those, which would have then led to this ability to exchange. I mean, I think there's been bits and pieces of excitement around this over the last several years. I think, with I mean, Apple did a pretty good job of like trying to at least extract some of your personal information, from health systems, as well as, kind of more commercial wearable devices, and kind of aggregate it in a way. But yeah, what you're alluding to is kind of the holy grail. Like, why can't my information just be made available to this other facility that I go to for the other reason? And I do think we're getting closer and closer to that. But I think now we're trying to have to re-engineer it kind of on the back end, um, to eventually make this all work. I am confident we'll get there, but and I think we're getting closer with some of the different pieces and parts of TEFCA, and I think once that becomes maybe more of a mandate, where anyone that's delivering care, either through a very small startup or a large health system, if everyone has to pipe their information into a centralized exchange, hopefully that information will be able to transmit through and be able to get it, and patients won't have to always fill out the same information over and over again, which I know patients get extremely frustrated with because they're like, "Why don't you have this information?" Um, so I think we'll get there. I'm hoping it. I feel like it's closer than it's ever been, but we're not quite there yet.
Um, I want to ask you like a selfish question. Because since I'm a pharmacist, I want to know your opinion. In the pharmacy world right now, we're in a big transition of where the pharmacist role is going. It's pharmacist role is expanding. I'm sure, as you might know, we have a doctor of pharmacy degree now. Before we had a bachelor, so we are more clinical than we were in the past. And I feel like, the healthcare hub of the community, they say the most accessible healthcare professional is a pharmacist because there's a pharmacy within 5 miles of every house. And I believe that the pharmacies are going to go steer away from that becoming the hub of dispensing medications, and they're going to become the healthcare hubs of the communities. And in my vision was that that centralized the centralized information of the patient will be in your pharmacy. The pharmacist, whether the patient goes to a cardiologist, family practice, hospital, and the end of the day, it all comes back to the pharmacy because they have to pick up the medications at the pharmacy. So I always saw the vision of the pharmacy being playing that centralized role. Um, and then I started watching some of your podcasts and seeing some of your stuff, and I was like, is technology gonna be the one that replaces that, or could a pharmacist play that role to be that centralized role? And I would love to give your opinion on what you think. Do you think it would be technology that would take that centralized role, or do you think a pharmacist could play a role in pushing that forward?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's an either or kind of question, but I think no, I agree. I mean, I think in several countries, I mean, across Europe, I mean, pharmacists do play a much more central role of, like you mentioned, that kind of first pass accessibility, being able to treat, you know, common things with medications and that sort of thing. And um I mean, I think in many ways in the US, I think our pharmacists are underutilized in that sense, because and again, if I back up with, when I worked in Kaiser, you know, Kaiser leverages pharmacists obviously for some medication dispensing, but we also, I mean, they utilized pharmacists throughout the clinical care team as well. I mean, we had in primary care, we would have a clinical pharmacist that was like in the clinic with us, that was essentially they would be able to help with all sorts of, I mean, really complex kind of medication issues around lots of different, um, patients that have tons of different diseases and problems that have lots of interactions. I mean, frankly, a clinical pharmacist is going to be way better at those types of things. But then I think to your question too, a clinical pharmacist can also really help with just some of those simple things that patients have questions about. Like, they have, these types of symptoms and, what is the best, even just over the counter medicines to use. Um, I mean, I think it's pretty confusing for patients. So, but then again, I mean, is technology going to, I honestly think it's going to be a convergence of kind of all of these where, the technology will be able to converge and be able to help in so many different ways, um, and get patients some of this advice that can help augment what the pharmacist can do kind of across the US and across the world as well. It's hard to say how it's all going to shake out, but you are right. I mean, if there's one exchange that's really good, back to your previous question about health information exchange, you're right. I mean, medications is probably one of them, like at least as far as like in a digital way. Um, a patient's medications are pretty easy to understand what they're taking by which ones they're filling. So that system of record is extremely accurate and is out there. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are around that too. Where you kind of think that puck is going, and where you think even the pharmacy world wants to help kind of
Yeah.
dictate where it goes too.
Unfortunately, I think the pharmacy world right now, at least the loudest voices are, I don't know how to say it, confused or like not approaching it the right way. I think certain people, maybe on LinkedIn, are approaching, their comments about AMA and the physicians, and I think it's big. They're approaching it in a harsh, not let's work as a team type of manner. I always said I didn't go to school to diagnose, right? And then there's a lot of pharmacists like on LinkedIn that have made comments of like AMA making comments about, oh, pharmacists didn't go to school to diagnose. And I read it. I'm like, yeah, I did it. I don't know why some pharmacists are trying to fight the fact that like, hey, we know how to diagnose. Yeah, we might know how, because we learned the medications and stuff like that, but we didn't go to school to diagnose. It's two different things. So I always said, on a plane, there's a pilot and there's a co-pilot, and then there's flight attendants, and there's you not two people cannot be a main pilot. And to me, the pilot on the in the healthcare team is the physician. The patient comes to the physician, gets diagnosed, and gets prescribed medications. The pharmacist's role to me is helping manage that patient, helping manage the medications, helping manage their treatments. We're not here to diagnose. So we need to learn how to understand to express our interest into becoming a healthcare team, because I feel like some pharmacists are taking an approach where like the AMA or some physicians are like, oh, pharmacists are going to take over our jobs, which the way some people, they want to prescribe, pharmacists to prescribe, pharmacists to diagnose, that's, then you need to go to medical school if you want to put that to me. So it's like, you need to understand our role. I understand we're doctors, doctorate degrees. We're doctors, but we're not physicians. It's two different things. So we need to understand our role in managing. We're medication experts. Yeah, physicians get 1 semester of pharmacotherapy. We get 4 years. So they can't take that away from us, right? And that's what we do. We are medication experts. So we need to understand that that's our role in helping manage the medications for a patient, not diagnose. And if we understand that, I think my theory of what I think the future of pharmacy will be is that those CVS's, Walgreens, or whatever the independent pharmacies will eventually turn into healthcare hubs, where now it takes 3-4 months to get to a doctor's office. You don't need to wait that long if you've already met your physician once. They can be followed up with a pharmacist, and if there's any issues that need to be escalated, then you can turn it over to the physician. But the pharmacist
Yeah.
can play that middle ground role. That's where I think it's going to be.
No, and I think, to click into one of the comments you made. I mean, it's really all about like creating teams and not trying to put up barriers. I think there's too much of that,
Yeah.
frankly, in the healthcare space where people are like, oh, the physicians don't want this person coming in and taking over and stepping on toes. And I don't know. I think there's a place for all the different expertise to really, like you said, work together as a team. And I'm hoping that like some sort of, you know, technology that maybe even hasn't even really been invented yet, but like maybe it's a component of lots of different pieces and parts that are going to come together and be able to stitch this together. Because the reality is we have a growing need from patients needing more advice and expertise, and we have a diminishing pool. There's there's not enough physicians that are being generated. There's not enough nurses that are going through. I don't know the data on pharmacists, but like I assume there's probably some of these same limitations, through the pipeline. Like we're gonna reach a point that we're not gonna have enough resource to take care of the needs of our actual people and communities. So we have to come up with ways to work together as a team and have technology in the middle of it to augment both sides, make it easier for the experts to take care of more, and then make it so the patients have the ability to start getting some of the advice and some of the guidance that they're looking for, um, so they don't have to wait so long, to be able to reach. But I love your concept of kind of this like pharmacy hub, being a place. I mean, I think we're starting to see it. Going back to HLTH, they're one of the big sponsors of the event was Kroger Health and Kroger, a large grocery chain, and you know, those are kind of some examples. And I know there's been some examples of other grocers who have gotten to like healthcare space, but you know, they're taking this approach that I thought is cautious, but right. They're combining obviously the food that's in their grocery store with pharmacies and clinics, um, along with like dietitians too. So they're kind of even throwing that into the mix because I mean people are coming to these stores to buy the food that they're eating, but they also have prescriptions they need to pick up, and they may have clinical needs or need this kind of nutritional device advice. So, how can that type of place that we all go to regularly, be a part of this kind of overall health ecosystem? I think it's
Yeah.
going to be interesting how things evolve over time, and
Yeah.
particularly in that space.
In Florida, we have Publix. I'm not sure if you're familiar. So Publix is a grocery store and it also has a pharmacy, it's Publix pharmacy, and they're great. I used to work there before I moved to the inpatient setting, and I love how I just realized what you just said, how important, valuable it is that like the grocery store is where we eat. So if you can have a nutritionist and a pharmacist and a provider, kind of that, I you just blew my mind with that. I didn't even think about that. That how Wow, yeah. You caught me with that
Yeah, we
one.
got to start figuring out how to integrate this. I mean, all these different, functions of our society that all
Yeah,
relate ultimately to health and wellness, like need to be better incorporated. Um, it's yeah, I mean, I think those are the types of things that are going to make it really better and more convenient, and ultimately lead to better outcomes for people.
yeah. I think someone's gonna take that idea you just threw and run with it because I think you blew my mind with that one. I didn't even notice it. And with things moving on to personalized care, I think that's not easy. One person can't do that job of making personalized care for a patient. So that's where I think the importance of that team aspect comes about. Like, stop trying to think like one person above the other. Like we're all one to try to help this one person. I think we need to go back to what we went to school for. Like we went to school to help patients. If we could just go back to that simple concept that we learned on the first day of school and understand that that's what they're for, then everything will be okay. I see your logo behind you, NerdMDs. First, before I ask my question, why the name? What happened with the name? Did you come up with it? How did you come up with it?
Yeah, so my buddy and friend and physician colleague Dale, he and I worked together in within Kaiser for many years, and we were kind of as we were evolving, kind of in our specific kind of informatics space, we were just wondering, there was a lot of confusion. We would say that we were, doing informatics, and people would, even internal folks, we'd be like, well, what is that? Are you guys just dealing with information and data, or and really, we wanted to try to encapsulate what it meant to be kind of a physician who was really trying to make technology work best, in those clinical environments. And Dale and I do a lot of ideating on the side, and call it spitballing or whatever. But we would, one day we were just kind of searching for essentially URLs that were available that kind of encapsulated
It
that,
always it
and we
always
tried
starts
all
there.
sorts. Yeah. And this was back in like 20, I don't know, 2019. So it was a while ago. And, we stumbled across NerdMDs was available. And we were like, wow, that's like catchy, and it kind of does encapsulate. And um, so really we registered the URL. That is actually how it like was born. But then, I think over time we were like, okay, well, what can this be? And, obviously we had kind of corporate day jobs. And so it was I would call it like a little side thing where we were trying to start to build like a little bit of a community around this, and, just get other like-minded, particularly physician kind of informaticist, technology-minded folks. But, I think that's really how it was born. And, obviously we spun it into a podcast too, to kind of, again, just kind of branch out from the brand. But that's what NerdMDs is. So it's not I wouldn't say it's like an exclusive club for just physicians who are nerdy, but it's just trying to encapsulate, physicians who are minded in that way and really love working in this technology space to make healthcare better for both clinicians and for patients ultimately.
Awesome. And your mantra is let doctors be doctors, which I think it's so powerful in this day and age, as obviously we've been talking the past couple of minutes on. That resonates with many clinicians, right? I work with a lot of people, and we'll go into. I have a question for you on concierge medicine, which we'll talk about. Which I think that let doctors be doctors plays a big role in. What's that one key change you believe needs to happen for this let doctors be doctors to become a reality across the healthcare system?
Yeah, and that's a tough question for
Yeah,
one thing, but I think really what it is. I mean, I think it's really kind of we have to distill down all the stuff that like a physician does throughout their day and really try to minimize all those extraneous, call them administrative tasks or whatever. We have to like distill that down to so that is like the small piece of the work that a clinician or physician is doing each day. And I think when you get to that, it will allow doctors to be doctors again. And kind of, you made that comment about like when you go into pharmacy school, a nurse goes into nursing school, a doctor goes into medical school. Like that reason why you went there is because you really do just want to help people. Like that's the reason, that's the mission, behind going into these professions. And I think then you get into the reality of it and you're like, oh my God, there's like so much of this like paperwork and kind of mind numbing you know, activity that goes on where you have to just do all this extra stuff and you don't get back to like that core belief of helping the patient and really using your knowledge to come up and with helping to solve problems that people have. And I think that's really what it is. And so I think I have this like belief that technology can be a really good augmenter to start minimizing that. And we're already starting to see that with some of the newest AI um, that's about, cutting down. I mean, just you take just ambient notes, like not having to cognitively remember or jot down notes or typing, while you're having a conversation with a patient over the phone or in person. And I think just that, like those little things, if we can whittle down more and more of those, um, that is going to bring back more joy into the practice of medicine. And I think will bring back the profession to kind of the way everyone wanted it to be when they first wanted to go into it. Um, so I don't know if that didn't answer your question. Is there one thing, but I think it's more of just really starting to just cut back all these extra things that physicians have been required to do over time, and get it back to the core thing of having conversations, helping people solve their problems and get their questions and concerns addressed. I mean, that's really the core of what it means to be a physician.
yeah. When I discovered that technology of like you not having to write a soap note after, and like you always have that tendency to see on Epic, that like physicians copy paste from the previous from the previous notes. And I think when you get that technology where someone just scribing for you, you could just pay attention to the patient. One, you're gonna probably get less people copy pasting because they're just gonna get that interaction every single time, and you're just gonna get better patient care in the end of it. So I think that when I saw that part of it, I was like, wow, this is gonna make a big impact because I think it's gonna actually not tremendously help the doctors, but it's gonna tremendously help the patient as well. Um, you've mentioned how integrating new techs and old organizations can be a little bit of challenge, and we spoke about it a little bit earlier about how I mentioned that, I think that maybe it's a little harder for people in healthcare to catch on to these new techs. Can you share some of the biggest hurdles that you've seen in getting traditional healthcare systems to adopt these modern technologies?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've obviously posted about this type of concept quite a bit, but I think, yeah, I mean, I think what happens, I think you'll call them like the older, more legacy kind of larger health systems have been around for a long time. There's pieces and parts that get developed in those systems that make it hard to like make a change. Um, and some of them are because those health systems were more advanced for their time, and they had to go down a path of creating something, that didn't exist. But I think what happens is you go down those paths, and if you keep going down that path blindly and you're not paying attention to what's coming next or what's being developed, you end up going down these two divergent paths. And I think that's like what is really hard, for a lot of systems to say, okay, we've been going down this path for the last, 5 years, but now there's something out there that's like basically what we've been developing, but it's better. And you have to like be willing to say, okay, we're going to give up what we developed and shift, to this better piece. I mean, this happens in the EHR space all the time, right? I mean, EHR vendors like Epic, I mean, they don't develop everything and don't develop everything perfect. Um, and so sometimes you have to go outside and either find a different vendor that's doing it or look to develop it internally. And so some of the larger health systems will do that. And um, but then eventually, Epic does come around and they start to develop something that is, maybe on par or close to on par, and then maybe it even surpasses. And I think it's hard for, just like how startups have to pivot, from where they started to where they need to go ultimately. Um, I think large health systems have to do these pivots too, and maybe call them micro pivots, but they have to do these pivots. Um, and that can be real challenging in a big kind of complex organization because many times there's huge teams that are built behind these, and it's tough to get the change and want people to give up their baby that they've kind of developed, um, to pivot and switch. So that's really what I've seen in my experience, and some of those internal challenges that, I think a lot of larger legacy type health systems have to constantly go through.
Yeah, I remember when I was at Cleveland Clinic, one of the hospitals, one of the other hospital branches that we had was trying to get on Epic. And I think it took years. I don't know what exactly it was. I think it was 3 to 4, I want to say 3 to 4 years to just get that EHR switch to go to Epic. So I could just imagine implementing new technologies on how it's not as easy as just pressing a button, right? Because there's a lot of, unfortunately, patient information data and the workflow that you have to go through the trainings and all that stuff. So that's totally makes sense. Um, we spoke about, more physicians, pharmacists, nurses, healthcare professionals getting into creating these startup companies. What's one piece of advice you would give that someone that wants to start, that's a doctor, a pharmacist, a nurse that wants to get into this space? What's that one advice you would have for them?
That's a good question because I literally just went through this same internal, questioning myself, right? I think, what happens is as you start down your path of your career and you start gaining this experience, you do reach a point where you start to see and identify, big problems that are worth fixing. And And so, to specifically answer your question, I would say just do it. And I know that's a big leap of a type of a statement, but if you sit around just kind of contemplating, well, what if, or should I, or, you know, um, or I'm scared to, I think ultimately what will happen is you'll reach, if you don't do it, you're going to reach a point where you probably do regret, not trying. And I mean, that's personally what I was going through. And this has probably been going on for the last several years where I've been like, man, I really have so many of these ideas that I would love to explore and start doing. But I think when you're working in your traditional path, of a physician or a pharmacist or a nurse, it's like, it's hard to say like, I'm going to give that up. We put a lot of investment into our training um, and our expertise, and to say I'm just gonna like pivot and kind of start something new. But, you know, for me personally, I mean, what I came to realize is like if I didn't try and start, stepping into these startup roles, and gaining a new type of experience, I was probably gonna be in my 50s or 60s at some point, and I would look back and go, "Well, why didn't I try that when I was in my 40s?" So, I think, for some people, if you have a job that I think is flexible enough that you could kind of start dabbling on the side, I think that's a potential option. And, I think a good way to start. If you can't do that officially, like I wasn't really able to do any of that in my previous role. Um, I think there's different kind of communities you can become a part of, like different Slack groups or other online communities where you can at least just start getting to know people and kind of what's been going on. I got involved in a group called the Clinicians Who VC, which has kind of spun into an actual like VC fund called Scrub Capital. And, just being a part of that community for the last couple of years, kind of just it exposed me to other aspects of the healthcare startup world that, kind of continued to just say, okay, you got to do this. But so I think it depends on your own individual situation, but I think overall, if you have this thing in the back of your mind that's like, a bird bugging you to try something different and kind of go for it, I think you have to try. And what that means for you specifically will probably be different based on your individual circumstances. But I think you just if you really are thinking about it, you got to at least try something.
Yeah, I love your advice of like getting into those groups. And if you don't mind me adding one thing onto that is even if you can't get into the groups, start speaking to people and communicating through LinkedIn. And I think you can attest to that part. Like there's always ways to get involved. And I think, at least if you're having the conversations, if you're not able to start something, you might be able to get involved with someone else that is doing something that you can maybe contribute a little bit of time to. So, I'm not sure if you know who Patrick Bet David is. He's an entrepreneur, and he always says, not everyone's meant to be a number one. Sometimes you could be the best number two, and sometimes you don't need to be the starter. You could be the flat carrier. You don't have to be the main guy. Um, Value-based care. I think this is this model has been around. The conversation has been around for so long. As a rookie, when you're first starting out, when I heard about it, I was like, oh yeah, there's no more fee for service. It's value-based care. And then as you keep going, you're like, oh no, that's just the thing they're talking about making. It's still fee for service. What is the main barrier to preventing a more widespread adoption of value-based care? It just seems like such a better option. Is it I feel like I know the answer, and, maybe I'll answer and you agree. Is it the insurance companies that's holding that's that's holding back from this concept becoming a thing? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it truly is the system. Like it's a little bit of a chicken or the egg thing. Like, I mean, I guess if all of the community decided like, yes, we're going to go into this value-based mindset, then, the insurance companies would have to change. Um, but it's complex, but I think honestly, I mean, if you distill it down, it is. I mean, because that's the way ultimately, all the reimbursement and incentives are aligned to. And so until that changes or there's more and more systems that, um, like the one I used to work for, Kaiser, that truly are, I mean, they have the insurance product, they have the care delivery system, they have the pharmacy, the lab, kind of everything like all in kind of one integrated way. Um, until there's more examples like that or some sort of seismic shift that happens, I think it's going to be an uphill battle to ultimately reach a true kind of value based system that really is focused on outcomes, and that kind of short, medium, long term actual patient outcome, and not just the traditional kind of sick care, um, kind of reactive care type of fee for service world that we're in. Um,
When you
and
like
I don't know the immediate fix for that.
when you like really look into like the insurances, it makes you think like, is the doctor really the one that's trying to like cure me, or is it the insurance companies? Because if you look at it, like when it comes to certain like disease states, so when you're diagnosed with something, if the doctor wants to prescribe you X medication, right? The insurance is like, oh, no, no, no. You have to go up the tree. You have to start with this one first. If this doesn't work, then you can get this one. Then you could take this one. Then we'll pay for that one. And it's just like, okay, but my physician recommends for me to start with this one. You want me to start from zero, but my physician says no because my disease state is at a state where I can't start with this. So he knows it won't work. He might have done some sort of
Mhm.
testing, whatever. So it's like, are the insurance companies, and I see a lot of doctors steering away from taking insurance and starting concierge medicine, which I brought up earlier. Where do you see concierge medicine going? Because I feel like a lot of doctors are starting those services because they're just sick and tired of the insurance companies telling them how to treat their patients. Do you think that it would be a future where your insurance might just be for your like emergency uses, for just like hospital ER visits, and then people are willing to pay out of pocket for these concierge medicines, personalized care, healthcare professionals to care for their everyday care?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think, the reason why concierge medicine has kind of has grown and spawned up is it's probably twofold. I think it's patients want that kind of direct kind of contact, real kind of relationship with someone that they can trust. And then yeah, like you mentioned on the flip side, these physicians, particularly primary care physicians in this case, but there's concierge and different specialties as well that are evolving. But if we just take the primary care piece, yeah, I think it's these primary care physicians, like they want number one to have kind of less of that crazy burden like we talked about before, where they're having to fill out all these letters and sign all sorts of things and, kind of fight for different treatments that they want their patient to have. Um, and they can do it in this like simpler way. So I think the whole concept of concierge medicine has come about because of the problems in the greater kind of healthcare space. Um, and it's meeting the need, it's making it more enjoyable for the physicians who are doing it. And frankly, the patients are paying for it, obviously out of pocket. And many of them have insurance for, that they could go see somebody else, but they're just choosing to do this as kind of their first line kind of primary care services. Um, so all of that I think is the reaction to the system. The problem with it is what we touched on earlier is there's a lot of people that need care and there's a diminishing pool. And like these concierge systems, when they're only, it's one physician that's only taking care of like say 250 patients, that's that's not helping the problem either. So we have to find a way to have the feeling of concierge and the experience on the patient side, but allow that same doctor to actually care for a much larger pool of patients. And so far that doesn't exist yet. But that's at least the big idea that I'm always constantly thinking about is how do we get to that state?
And selfishly, I have to answer that with, I think if you involve a pharmacist in that group where it can help you manage the patient, you can definitely take on and take care of more patients. I think that I do think it outside of the pharmacy, how we describe where I think the pharmacy's role will be in the community. I think the pharmacist role is going to be a physician pharmacist in an office and then the family ambulatory care setting working together to take care of patients. I don't think that right now that exists a lot. There's some physicians that are doing that, taking on pharmacists on their team to help care about their patients. But I do think that will be a big part of it. That will help. If you had to make one bold prediction about the future of healthcare that might surprise people, what would it be? I'm thinking like something today that, if you say it today, the audience is gonna be like, "Yeah, okay, come on, that's not happening." Same way, like if we were to go back 20, 30 years, we're like, "Hey, one day you're gonna go online, press a button, buy what you want, and it'll be at your doorsteps within a couple hours." And you're like, come on, man. This thing is all the way in China. How is it going to get here tomorrow?
Yeah. I think there's two things that I would say to this, like kind of that are out there. And these aren't like super close to reality, but I think one of them is that I think in our lifetime, and again, I don't know what the time frame for this is, but I think for certain surgeries that are routine and kind of done over and over again, I think there'll be a robot that will be doing those, autonomously, not too far out. So that's one. And then I think maybe the other one is that we always hear that like, is technology going to take the role of like a pharmacist or a physician? And I don't think it's going to take it over, but I think that patients will get a ton, if not most of their routine medical advice through a piece of technology in the future. And the physician or the pharmacist or whoever, the person will be kind of in the loop as needed, but that patient will actually, just like the way we can get Amazon delivered, within 2 days to our doorstep, pretty much anything we want. I think people will be able to get that instantaneous kind of clinical advice in the same way. And it'll keep them out of the hospital, keep them out of the clinic. And then, um, further downstream, I think we will eventually flip medicine on its head and we'll actually care about preventing, like truly preventative. Um, and and I think the consequence of that is that the way our health system looks right now with big, huge hospitals that are filled with people, I think hospitals will dwindle down and there won't be as big of a need for actual like hospital facilities because we will be preventing all these things that happen that require hospitalizations today. Um, so I know you asked for one. I think I gave you three, but I think those things are three distinct possibilities that will happen.
Yeah, the hospital point you made. I always say, when I was going through school, the big point was like, go to school, go to residency, and then after residency, work in an inpatient setting. Like that's the goal to do work in an inpatient setting. And I think we're trending away from that, at least from a pharmacist perspective. That like the AM care setting is becoming the clinics are becoming the hot spot of the future, and not so much, working in an inpatient setting is probably not the future of like where you want to go as a pharmacist, in my opinion. I think ambulatory care clinic settings are where we're going to make the most impact as physicians and pharmacists. Um,
Yeah, no, I agree. That's where I hope the puck is going.
I think I you don't have to answer this question because it's going to take an hour for you to answer it. For I feel like we could talk about it for an hour, but I really want to get at some point, maybe part two, your thoughts on like the hospitals and like the business of the hospitals, and how we've already kind of explained that we're steering away from it, but I would love to dive deep into that because that's a interesting that's an
Yeah,
interesting one there. Um,
it is.
two more questions for you. We spoke about technology future, where you see it going 10 to 50, 20 years. I'm sure you saw the Tesla robot. You mentioned robots, taking over the surgeries. I don't know if you ever seen the Netflix show Intern. I think they're when they do the surgeries, they're using like a robot to kind of do the surgery. Like the guy doesn't do the surgery himself. Do you see the Tesla robot playing a role in the patient's health in the future at all?
I mean, I think so. Yes. I mean, I think as I think eventually we will have some sort of robot that's able to assist us in a variety of things. I mean, I think initially it'll be more with like we talked about the tedious tasks that a physician has to do throughout their day. There's tons of tedious tasks that we do at our homes, and where we live throughout the day. So I think initially, probably a robot in the house will be doing those types of tasks. But yeah, I think down the line, it's entirely possible that that robot will evolve into the healthcare assistant, be able to ask those types of questions. Um, and be an extension, of the folks that are, kind of leading that and taking care of you. So I think it's definitely a possibility. I'm excited about that.
I am. I'm likewise. I think the future of human beings is going to be amazing, like how advanced humans will be. Because, I mean, when my wife has to do laundry or cook or do clean the house, it takes a long time, man. So I give it up to anyone that has that task at their household that has to take care of that. Imagine that time being spent on doing something valuable, like something valuable to push humanity or help yourself, help your community, help others. it's so much time being spent on those tedious tasks during the day and on your days off, on a Saturday. Who wants to do laundry on a Saturday? Come on. So,
No, I hear you. I mean, it's even just some of the things that we kind of think that like you just have to do, like, like meal planning, for a week. Like what are you gonna make for dinners, the week? Now you gotta like consciously think about it. There's obviously different apps that can come up with with recipes and ideas, but I mean, you can I saw a demo recently of someone just using the conversational form of OpenAI's ChatGPT where they were just framing up that like, they're gonna have this party, there's gonna be this many people, there's these people that have different, kind of dietary restrictions and, you know, asking it to kind of create this menu and everything. Like, I don't think it's a far stretch to think that, this future Tesla robot they would already know what you like to eat and what you have made in the past. They'll have that whole catalog. So like, why can't that just generate a meal list and a grocery list and then order the groceries and then the groceries are delivered to your house? Like, you could remove all of those types of cognitive things that, tasks that you have to do. And I think just more and more of those things will be whittled down over time. So people can actually just spend more time on more meaningful things that they want to do.
I think one of the big things, and I'm sure you agree with, your health. It depends on like how you eating healthy goes a long way in your health. And I think a lot of people use an excuse of like, I don't have time to cook, I don't have time to do this, I don't have time to pay a chef. Well, here it is. This is it. And then I think our health spans is going to be crazy. Like in 50, 60 years, we're going to be living to like 120 and we're going to be looking back, be like, wow, 85 was old back then. No, like that's like young. And then like 50 years. One last question for you. This I like asking this question to all my guests and anyone that's on the show. If I was to go back to high school or even medical school, and I was to speak to your best buddy or your favorite teacher, and I was like, "Who was Adam?" What would they say?
Oh, that's interesting. I hate like talking about myself in that way, but I mean, I think, I don't think I've changed a lot even from back then. I think the difference in high school, you don't know what your future is going to be. So I think, my teachers or coaches, you know, I I was really into playing sports back then too, and I sports and academics were both really important to me, and I think to this day, like, those things I mean, I don't play as many sports anymore since I've had some orthopedic injuries that limit that, but I still love exercise, I still love, to learn, I still love to do the best work that I can, and I think that's the way those folks would describe me is, just someone that has an insatiable appetite to keep learning, trying to help others around me, be better as well, and, yeah, just keep striving for change and for good, for the greater good of people. That's, at least that's how I hope some of those, teachers, coaches, or best friends that I had back in high school would
Uh,
describe me.
Awesome. And before we go, I got to give you kudos because I know we didn't really talk about it, but I know you're in your medical school days of back in the day, your hobby, the web designing, graphic designing. You like I mentioned, you designed the NerdMDs logo, and that's something that I taught myself back in the day. I web building websites, HTMLs, Google the designing like Photoshop from everything. So, and I know that's an art. It takes a lot of time. If you're designing a website, one little dash is missing, you're pardon my language, you're screwed. So I could definitely respect someone that understands that side, along with being a physician, along being in informatics. So I can't imagine what goes on in your brain, but I would love to see what's happening in there because there's a lot of great things that are being built, and I'm sure you got many great things coming in the future. So I'll leave the last word for you.
No, I mean, thank you for having me on the show. I mean, obviously a great conversation. And I think more of these types of conversations, especially, with, you know, like where you're a pharmacist, I'm a physician, like just talking about where the future of medicine is going and healthcare in general, or just health. I don't call it healthcare, just health in general. I think is just so important. So I really thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate you taking the time and always like meeting new people and having great conversations.
Of course. Thank you so much, Dr. Carewe, and thank you so much for everyone that was tuning in.